Great Wednesday. Welcome to the Fully Human Connections podcast. I'm your host, King, and I'm joined by my co-host, Reggie. How you doing today, Reggie?
Doing well, King. Always good to be here on Wednesday morning with you. So I'm raring to go.
Excellent, excellent. Well, what's your spiritual energy number?
Operating at a 10. Really didn't have to choose that this morning. It was just there. I had a good night's sleep, got up early, had a good breakfast, got to work early. And so I have all cylinders firing as far as I can tell.
So, what time is it? You have to go to bed to get a good night's sleep?
I shoot for 9:30. Typically, I'm in bed between then and 10, and could I get up at 5:30? And I mean, 8 hours is a legitimate target for me. It wasn't always that way, but as I get older, I need a good 8 hours. I can't do much more than 9. Occasionally on a weekend, I might sleep a little bit later, but that doesn't really help. And I can get away with 7 to 7.5, once in a while. But 8 hours, kind of average tends to work for me nowadays. When I was in college, I'd get it by on 6, but those days are long gone.
I wish I would get 8 hours. I would pay to get 8 hours. There was some way I can get 8 hours.
Well, if you want to pay me, I'll try to help you. Just kidding.
Well, at this stage, anything that works. I think I had 8 hours of sleep since I was a kid.
Yeah.
Well, I can lay in bed behind 8 hours, but I definitely want to stay asleep. But with that being said, I'm a 10 as well. Didn't have any major challenges to try to prohibit me from being a 10, other than just, dealing with technology. I'm constantly changing my configuration here in my office, but I'm a 10 regardless. And I go right into my gratitude moment. And this is what I say that, really helps me get in the 10 mindset, even when challenges come in my life to try to prevent me from being a 10. And I suggest this to people who are listening, focus on your gratitude moment. Go through your list of gratitudes, whether you write it down on a list or like me, I keep them in my head because I say pretty much the same thing every day. I may add a variant here or there, but the core is always the same. And it's a little thing to be grateful for. And that's, to me, is what always puts me at a 10. So with that being said, being grateful for my health, being grateful for my life, my ability to see, hear, walk, talk, stand, breathe, and have a sound mind. Those things, once I go through that list there, that always has me at a 10, because it could always be worse. Because if any of those things were missing or had problems, then that would be the most dominant issue I'd be facing. And so I'm grateful for those things being that way. And I'm also grateful for the opportunity to be on a podcast with you, grateful for the challenges and problems in my life, because through those come growth, wisdom. I'm grateful for some of the things I'm continuing to keep learning. I'm grateful for the ability to constantly keep learning something new every day at this stage, constantly testing myself, and always surprised when I learn something new and interesting. And then finally, I'm grateful for whatever this day is going to, the possibilities of this day is going to provide. Let me say that. So now, with that being said, what's your gratitude moment, Rich?
Yeah. Thank you for sharing all that. Yeah, I'm grateful for my basics of indoor plumbing and safe drinking water on a on-demand basis. It's always there for me. And I think I told you in the last month, in fact, I rent a house where we have a well, and the pump in the well was 20 years old, and it gradually stopped working in the last couple of weeks. So we had, the better part of a week where we didn't have access to, water from our faucets, and also we had to kind of improvise. And that's just was a great reminder for me of just how fortunate I've been my entire life. 71 years now, there's always been indoor plumbing, hot water on demand, a toilet that flushes, a refrigerator with food in it, and supermarkets where I can go get, fresh food. So I'm grateful for all of that. My relatively good health. I just got my physical exam in the last 2 weeks, and all of my blood work is good. I have aches and pains sometimes in the morning when I wake up that weren't there 20 years ago. but I can kind of stretch them and move them, and they get a little bit better. But I'm just grateful for relatively good health, and as far as I can tell, my mind still seems to be functioning well as well. And then good friends, and my family, which is mostly cousins now, mostly are far away. With the closest one's about an hour and a half, but I still, get along with them and occasionally see them. So it's just good to have those people that have known me for virtually all of my life. So that's kind of a cool thing to have. So I'm grateful for all of that.
Excellent. Those are definitely things to be grateful for. You didn't mention the cat, by the way.
Yeah. So, and actually, I meant to. I just before we got on here, I mentioned it to you. So we have, because Shari's mom passed away, and she had a 17-year-old cat who we now have adopted, and he's been in the house for just about going on 2 weeks now. And when she left for work this morning, I knew he would try it, so I opened the door really slowly, and he just squeezed through the opening, and I had to grab him in not the most skillful way, because if he got out, I probably would have been late for this podcast, because I can't let him just stay outside yet by himself. He's an outdoor cat, but he doesn't know the neighborhood, and we have bear and fox and hawks, and I don't want Shari to come home from work and say, well, Chip is gone. and that would be my responsibility. So I just grabbed him, and he went, "Wow!" And I put him down, and he stalked away, went and drank some water. And then when we came upstairs, he let me pet him again. So he doesn't hold a grudge. He's not like President Trump. So he's not, he just was okay to be loved again, which was really healthy. I felt relieved about that. But it's a reminder, because I have responsibility for this living being who's 17 years old. And, we know by statistics that that's pretty old for a cat. And it's just interesting to learn how he operates and watch how he navigates us and how we learn to navigate him. So it's kind of cool.
Excellent. Well, now that we got all our gratitude moment and our spiritual energy levels being at a 10, ready for a great show. So why don't you walk us into our topic for today?
Yeah, so our topic today is going to be to take a look at specifically the Democratic mayoral candidate in New York City, Zohran Mamdami. I hope I said his first name correctly. I don't know if it's Zohran or Zohran. I think it's Zohran. And just as an asterisk, this is a suggestion that you came up with last week, because it'd be interesting to speak about him. And so depending on how this goes, you either get all the credit or all the blame for the topic. But more seriously, we're doing this in the context of what we've been speaking about for the last 3 years. You and I met, we were introduced. I just found an email to this effect this week. May 25th, 2022 is when Kent introduced us to an email, because I was getting rid of some old emails, and I found that one, and I did save it, put it in my King folder. So I didn't want to lose that. That's actually true. But we've been speaking about my 2022 book, Healing America's Narratives, The Feminine, the Masculine, and Our Collective National Shadow. And all that means for the United States, since, it goes back historically to the founding of the country, but we're staying with that, and we're seeing this man's candidacy, and he's pretty young. I think he's 33 years old. He's a Muslim. He's a self-described democratic socialist. And he's been endorsed by Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, no Republicans that I know of, and a variety of other Democrats, both in New York State and nationally, and most recently by former Labor Secretary Robert Reich, who had served in the Bill Clinton administration. So he's an interesting character. And we're just going to, I'm intrigued because you suggested this, and, I've been reviewing his platform in the last couple of days just so I have more to say. So that's where we're going. And Donald Trump has promised that if Mamdami were to become the mayor of New York City, that Trump would take over the city through the federal government. He has already said that, which is an interesting, not surprising, but an interesting perspective, but understandable because Mamdami believes in helping the poor, and he's a Muslim, and his skin's not really dark, but it's darker than Trump's, so he would be a classic target for the current president. So I'll stop there and let you take the first swing at this.
Well, yeah, a wonderful topic. I'm glad that you were willing to go explore this topic with me. I know now my reasons for wanting to choose this topic may be somewhat controversial to some of our listening audience and maybe even you as we get further into this. And first, let me start by saying I would definitely vote for him if I lived in New York. And what surprises me, but not really surprises me, is how established Democrats have reacted to him. I'm talking about Hakeem Jeffries, Democratic House Leader, Chuck Schumer, Senate Majority Leader. They haven't endorsed him. They claim they haven't met him yet or had a substantial conversation with him, but they have chose not to do that. And to me, in this environment that we're in right now, and that's a part that I really have an issue with established Democrats, is that they still want to stay within their parameters that they set for themselves as centrist Democrats, because they believe that's what the country is. And if you look at the history of how that strategy has fared for them, they've lost consistently. And it's like they've lost the abortion, Roe versus Wade. They've lost over key Supreme Court issues concerning, campaign donations. So they haven't shifted, but yet still it's like that old saying, I don't know where it originated from, but it said common that the definition of insanity is repeating the same actions and expecting a different outcome. Mm-hmm. So it's like they believe they could just continually run on the morality side and the hope side as those being their leading agenda to say, look, we're not as bad as those other people. They're evil. We're inclusive. We open to everybody. But yet and still, I feel as though they don't bring any true promise. And now we have a potential mayor that's willing to come in and shake things up just as radically as the Republicans have been. Just as they've been cruel, he's wanting to be kind and supportive. And the Democrat establishment won't support him. They want to endorse him. At least they haven't done it yet, because they don't want to be shifted to that direction, is what my take on that is that they still want to maintain a centrist position. And they're not, we talk about emotional intelligence, and Stephen R. Covey talks about one of the 4 pillars of emotional intelligence is self-awareness. It's like they don't have any self-awareness as a body to say what we've done and what we've been doing doesn't work. And if we really want to get our base excited about voting for us, as opposed to just running on, or at least we're not them. But here's what we're doing for you. Get excited, get behind us, and get people really out in the streets and get people really supporting them. That's where, to me, is what he's done. He's mobilized the New York base. He's bringing a lot of socialists, but they claim they're against ideals. But I think most Americans would support that. It was interesting. I was reading some comments about him online on my YouTube channel that came across my feed, and it was actually a video from New York. I think it was a New York Post. And of course, that's conservative, and they were talking about how he wants to tax millionaires, and that's so wrong. And it's so funny how people who are not millionaires can really defend the position of taxing more millionaires and raising taxes because they believe all Americans should be able to choose and do what they want with their money. And it's like, that's not the issue. The issue is everybody should pay their fair share of taxes. That's the issue. So if you make more money, you should pay more in taxes. But for folks who are not millionaires who defend that position of um, less taxes and that everybody should pull themselves up by their own bootstraps, which, again, shows a lack of history because you understand the history of this country. That's never been the case. People have not pulled themselves up by their bootstraps. That's a false narrative that we live under, that so many people go to as talking points. So I wrap it up by just saying that I expect Trump not to like him. And that's good. If Trump liked him, that would be bad. He likes Eric Adams. And we see what that...
Yeah, good luck, Eric.
Right. We see how people feel about Eric Adams. So that's the first step to me that shows that he's different and he's doing something to shake up the body electric. And I think that other candidates running across Democratic elections coming up should definitely look at what he's doing, follow his lead, and really let the country sit on that dividing line to say, if we're not going to get pulled all the way over here to this right side that we're being pulled over to, then we have to have a more radical position that's more just, more equitable on the left side to get people really excited and get people really engaged and looking forward to voting for Democrats this term. 2006 term.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks for that. And I agree. It's it's politics, and I'm not excusing the mainstream Democrats, whether it's Jeffries and Schumer and others, for not endorsing the man who won the Democratic primary in New York City by 12 percentage points over the second place guy who was a household name in the Democratic machine in New York State, Andrew Cuomo. So I hope they do get on board. But there's just two things I want to just mention specifically. One in particular around his platform. I was just looking through it, and the idea of free child care, some things around healthcare, of like I forget what he calls it, a baby. Let me see if I have it right here. I want to get the language right. Baby baskets for New York newborns. And what that means is basically when a child is born, there's a whole program where the mothers get trained in mothering, especially for first-time mothers, in terms of everything from what it's like to give birth, breastfeeding, and all of these different things. And then free child care. He's looking for to make city transportation, the busing, free. He wants to have some city-run grocery stores because the price of groceries. The price of rent in New York City is so high that a grocery store, who typically doesn't own the building that they're in, has this exorbitant rent. So the food prices are up. And if you're living, if you're not one of the wealthy people on the Upper West Side or, in Sono or wherever, it's crazy. But what he's proposing has already been successfully done places in Europe. So this is just one specific example that I know because I've recently read about it. So Timothy Snyder, the historian that I've been citing in terms of his book on freedom and his book on tyranny, he almost died in 2019 into 2020. I won't give his whole story there, but based on his experience, beginning in Germany, and then ended up in New Haven, from Germany to Florida to New Haven. He almost died in 3 places. He wrote a book called Our Malady. It's a very short book, and it's an overview from a patient who almost died, who has a historian's mindset about American healthcare. And one of the things he said when he was telling his story was that his firstborn, he has 2 teenage kids, his firstborn was actually born while he and his wife were working in Austria, in Vienna. And in Vienna, you're invited into the hospital. You have first of these training courses before you're born that are required by law. So it's not just that they're free to help you be good parents, all right? And then the mother is required to stay in the hospital after giving birth. It's either 72 or 96 hours, it's either 3 days or 4 days, just so she can be taught with the infant how to clean the baby, how to breastfeed, how to swaddle, how all this stuff. And the father, I don't know if the father is required, but he's definitely invited in as well. That's required in Austria. In the United States, as soon as you're kicked out within 24 hours of giving birth, whether you're ready to go or not. And that's based on insurance. So what Mamdami is inviting into New York City is, in that one case, is a very, very successful program that already exists, definitely in Vienna, in Austria, and probably in other European countries as well. So it's not like he's making up something. He sees nations where healthcare is important, and taking care of infants from birth, making sure that the mother and the infant are safe and knowledgeable is really important, because this way you get a good start, whether you're Warren Buffett's kid or you're the kid of a single mom who's, the father ran away. You get the same start, or at least, a relatively good start. So that's the type of thing he wants to do. All right. I'd like to get all of Congress together and say, all those in favor of taking care of infants from birth forward, raise your hands. All those opposed, raise your hands. Right? That's one thing. But the larger overarching thing has to do with Americans' fear of language. And you mentioned it, and I just want to dive a little deeper. Americans are terrorized by the words socialism or even socialized, because they equate that in some weird kind of way with communism and bad things happening. But in fact, America is never going to be a socialist nation. But what the successful democracies in Europe do is they provide more social programs to even the playing field, so more of their populations can be healthy, and healthy in the largest meaning of the word. So in the United States, and you and I have spoken about this before, and it's in my book, we have a socialized interstate highway system, right? Locally, we have socialized public education. We have a socialized military. Every town has a socialized fire department and police department. I don't have to arm myself personally if the Chinese, I don't want to pick on any country, if some nation invades us. I don't have to pave my own roads. My taxes help me do that. And the one place where the United States of America refuses to provide socialized programming is arguably the most important one for any human being, and that's in the area of healthcare. And that's because there are a small number of people making a lot of money in the medical corporations, in the pharmaceutical corporations, and in the insurance corporations. And they have their dividends to pay their shareholders. And they fight back against anything that's going to make healthcare more available for more people at a better price. And that's what Mamdami, in that one area, that's what he's talking about doing. And if we're going to survive as a species, that's the direction we have to go. Because the more we create billionaires and 100 millionaires, the people with 10 figures in front of their name, I think it's 10, in front of their net worths, the more poor people there are going to be, who don't have access to basic needs, and they're going to end up being unhealthy. Some of them, especially the men, are going to do stupid shit and end up going to jail, and then we'll pay for them in the prisons. And we already know that. We've known that for decades. We've known that since the middle of the 20th century. But back to your point, even the mainstream Democrats, who I more or less agree with on certain issues, they're part of that bigger picture of the conventional way of doing things, and they're not against corporations. And they won't legislate against corporations because those who still take corporate money as part of their campaigns have debts to pay, as all the Republican people in Congress do. And so if you notice who, and this is the last thing I'm going to say, who has endorsed Mamdami so far, right? Bernie Sanders doesn't take corporate money. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez doesn't take corporate money. Elizabeth Warren, I don't think takes corporate money, but she's endorsed them. And there's a bunch of other people too. I'm willing to bet that Chris Murphy will endorse him in the near future as well, because he doesn't take corporate money. It drives me crazy asking me for money every other day. So there's, the big fear of the S word. Oh, that's socialism. Ask any poor farmer, who hasn't received government subsidies. That's another form of socialized programs for large farms. All right, we'll pay you for your crops. We'll pay you to produce this, and then we'll waste it, basically. So there's lots of social programs. And then the last part is there's government bailouts for large corporations. That's socialized programs. And I can go through, just off the top of my head, every airline, General Motors, Harley Davidson, Chrysler, Ford, all of them have received government socialism. When they needed bailouts, they got money from you and me. All right? But God forbid we help poor people. So it's a real hypocrisy. And God bless this guy, Mamdami, who was willing to say it all out loud. And I'm glad that he was in New York City, where there are enough poor people and enough people who care about each other. Because I always like to say this, the anti-immigrant stances are mostly in states and cities where there aren't many immigrants. And people's views of immigrants are what they get on their phones and videos through Fox News and Breitbart and those other Newsmax, where they just show all these, these villainous immigrants doing allegedly bad things. But those who ride on buses and in subways and walk down the same streets as in New York City, as with LA, if you ride the subway, it's the United Nations. And they all get along on the subway. They go to work in the morning, they come home at night. And they get along. Their idea of an immigrant or somebody who has an accent or a slightly different skin pigmentation isn't based on their phones, it's based on real life, and they get along. So, Trump doesn't like New York City because they convicted him. Or they, at least they charged him. The state actually is what convicted him. So he took his ball and went to Florida. I'm not going to play here anymore. So, okay, I went on longer than I thought I was. But yeah, I agree with you. If the Democrats are thinking, if they get behind Cuomo and try to hurt Mamdami, big mistake.
You say if. I say they will. They constantly keep making the same mistake. It's just like in New Jersey, I guess about eight years ago. When Cory Booker was running, he was running against an established, when he ran for mayor, he's running against an established Democrat that had been in office for years. And Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson and other established Democrats, they came out, they villainized Cory Booker, said he wasn't from the area and he wasn't going to represent them. Now look at Cory Booker, where we see him at now. So they constantly keep making that same mistake. And that's the part that really bothers me, that you can't constantly advocate that you're about justice and equality, but don't show it in your behaviors. Yeah. So that's what makes them look hypocritical, and that's why they lose. They try to run on the side of we have the moral imperative, we're the honest and equitable and all-inclusive party, but then your actions don't show that. So, and it's like, one thing you can say about the Republicans, even though that's where they are right now, as far as the mega Republicans specifically, is that now they get what they want. they do what they want. Democrats get in power, and it's all, well, we would like to do that. We would like to have get rid of, when Joe Biden said, well, I'm gonna get rid of student loan debt. Nice idea. Most people were with most Americans with it. Supreme Court stepped up and blocked them, but Congress and Democrats didn't really stand behind them and ride with them like the Republicans ride with Trump. And I don't expect them to come out and say we're going to have a Democratic king the same way, but at least on certain key issues that are important to the majority of people, and the polls show that, they should be saying unequivocally, we're all going to back this 100%, and we're going to put our political careers there. But I still believe that, see, for me, for a candidate to get my vote now, and this is where you and I would think differently. Like I said, from my perspective, I really haven't felt much democracy as identifying by being a black man, not necessarily identifying, being a black man. I haven't felt much democracy. So getting rid of it is not as fearful to me. Yes, it can get a whole lot worse. But by the same token, going back to where we were before doesn't seem appealing either. So, and what I mean by that is, look at the fact that we are sitting here still in a country that believes that we should have the electoral college. See, for me, candidates should be running on getting rid of the electoral college. It should go.
I agree with that 100%. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's going to be a game changer going forward. But they don't run on that day. Then Democrats, the Republicans have always ran on making it seem like they really care about the Constitution. But we see they don't care about the Constitution. They care about what fits their agenda. So the Constitution can fit their agenda at the time, then we're going to be a staunch, we're going to defend it. But if it gets in their way of their agenda, then we can get rid of it. Same thing with laws. And so next thing to me, the Democrats are someone who's running and you're really going to be a party of equity and inclusion and caring for people, then you should run on term limits. You shouldn't be in office for your fifth term, fourth term, these 8 years. Get in office, do your job. Don't be so focused on building your, it's like one of the things I learned early on, again, when I was identifying as a black male, that the black leaders who were, whether they were elected, appointed, anointed, or selected, if they made the mistake of making the struggle their business, and that's your business, in other words, you make your money because of the struggle, because of the conditions that people are in, you really don't want that to end because that's your business, right? And a lot of politicians, I really see this on a really local level in Baltimore, folks who just consistently been in office for 15, 20 years, and they run on a basis that we're from Baltimore, elect us, we know it better. It's like you had 20 years and the city has not improved. How do you have the audacity to run again? It's like if you're a customer of mine and I constantly give you poor service, I overpromise, I underdeliver, overcharge you, and then I come back with, don't you want to buy more products from me? Why do you not want to continue to do business with me? And shocked when you choose not to do business with me any longer. If you're not creating value, then you have to go. Simple as that. And that's where I feel as though we got to begin to hold our politicians more accountable. Bernie Sanders have shown that he's consistently advocated for the middle income or poor individuals, advocating taxing the rich. He's always said it. You can look at, even though Bernie Sanders, every video I've seen of him, he's always looked old. I've never seen a young image of Bernie Sanders. Even when they go back in the 70s, he looks like he's in the 60s at that time frame. But that's just a little joke. But my point is, he's been consistent with his messaging. You know where he stands. So I would think that when you look at the morality, integrity, authenticity, that's somebody who we should be looking to vote for, especially now after we see what's happening with Trump. We shouldn't be, as a country, willing to, again, compromise and say, for example, the Democrats, hopefully they won't do this, decide that in 2028, they're going to run Hakeem Jeffries because he's black, and they feel that, okay, we can tap into some of that momentum and try to rally people around him. He doesn't seem like anyone that I would vote for, regardless of his skin color. Where he stands politically, to me, he stands as he would definitely be a corporate Democrat that would continue to accept corporate donations and dollars. And so that means that his decisions, his influence is always going to be in that case. And lastly, the last thing I would say when I wrap up my point, and then we'll get ready to cut to our break for our sponsor, is that if you really want to shake things up, the third thing that Democrats should be running on, or independents or anybody who's really running for office, is looking to shake up this system that we're in right now, is get rid of lobbying. Because if you don't get rid of lobbying, then to your point about healthcare, then what we're doing is an exercise of futility. When, again, the lobbyists can sit here on L Street in Washington, D.C., which most lobbying firms who are really about their money have offices, they can sit here and consistently, which they have and which they will continue to do, is healthcare providers can constantly put all that money into these lobbyists who go there and wine and dine and bribe elected officials to vote for what's in the best interest of those corporations against their own constituents. And then they'll say, well, then they come out and they blame someone else as the reason why they couldn't get something passed. And then we're supposed to vote for them again next year because they run on those same hopeful promises on the election cycle. So to me, it's like the best thing Donald Trump and this whole mega movement represents is we can no longer keep making these status quo false promises. We're going to change one way or the other. Either we're going to go worse or we're going to go for the best. But we're not going to keep trying to stay in the middle. And that's where we have to begin to, I think, make our minds up as a country, which one we really want to be on, and then either fight for that. But let's piggyback our conversation on the second side of our sponsorship break.
The playbook for growing a local business online is simple. Capture new leads, conversationally convert those leads into sales, turn those customers into positive reviews, and then reactivate those customers into repeat buyers. And that's exactly what our platform does. In order to consistently generate new leads, you first need to be found. The quickest way to get search engines like Google to put your business at the top of search results is by having a steady flow of positive reviews. With our platform, you can show up in search and stand apart from your local competition by easily collecting new customer reviews through text. But getting found is only the beginning. Most consumers choose the first business that responds to them. So unless you start conversations with potential customers almost instantly, they'll go somewhere else. That's why we make starting conversations with website visitors as easy as clicking a button, connecting you instantly through text message so the conversation doesn't end when they leave your website. And we bring all your leads, no matter where they come from, into a single conversation stream that supports text, email, video messaging, Google Business Chats, and even Facebook and Instagram DMs, so you can respond faster and more efficiently than ever. When it comes to turning all those conversations into customers, we make collecting payments just another convenient part of the combo, so you get paid faster no matter how they prefer to pay. Next, you'll want to turn your new customers into happy reviews, which is a snap with our new review request quick actions. The more conversations and customers you generate, the easier it becomes to drive repeat business. We make reactivating contacts into customers as easy as, yup, you guessed it, the push of a button. With bulk actions, you can send out text and email campaigns to generate new sales whenever you have a new update, promotion, or story to tell. We make modern online marketing simple. Let's start growing your business today.
And we're back. Welcome to the Fully Human Connections podcast. Again, I'm here with King, and here with Reggie. So, Reggie, I think we were on your take now.
Yeah, well, you are here with King and Reggie because you're present to yourself. You're self-aware.
Yes.
You can say that. um, yeah, I mean, one of the things that I try to remind myself of on a daily, if not moment to moment basis, um, is that, and this is obvious. I'm going to say it out loud anyway, though, is that not everybody views the world the same way I do. You obviously not everybody views the world the same way you do, and there are still people who, um, you know, think that Donald Trump is doing good things for America, and that someone like Zohran Mamdani is, a dangerous person because he's doing things that are disrupting the status quo. Um, Even though the status quo only serves a relatively small portion of the American electorate, um, and especially serves the highest portion of it in terms of income and net worth, and really doesn't serve well um, the folks in the bottom 50%, let's say, of income and net worth. Um, so I just want to bring it back to like an underlying concept that it's probably my primary, I don't want to call it a metric, well, my primary foundational perspective on almost any topic, and that's developmental worldview. And we've been using a 4-stage shorthand. This is all based in longitudinal studies, over 50 years of research. But the shorthand, again, and I know you're probably getting tired of hearing me say this, but it's, am I just concerned about myself? Am I me-centric? Or am I concerned about me and my group? My group might be my family, my political party, my company, my sports teams, any select group, my religion, for example. But it's an us or group centrism, which is more inclusive than if I'm just me-centric, but it's not the end game, basically. The next step, the next stage of developmental worldview is all of us centric. Now, we can say that in two ways. From a national perspective, it would mean I'm concerned about all Americans, not just people in my state or my party. And that's progress. If I really care about what the next legislative move is, or the next Supreme Court or lower court decision is, and how it impacts not just me and my party and people in my state, but the entire country, that's a fairly sophisticated view of the world, which the vast majority of Americans and the vast majority of people in other countries don't hold. But there's another way to talk about all of us, and this is a more global perspective. When I say all of us, I mean all human beings. So when we do something in America, or when somebody in China does something in China, or Russia, or Italy, or France, or wherever, what's its impact on all human beings? So that's even a more sophisticated, it's more inclusive, it's more comprehensive, it's a more complex view. Before we do this, I want to know what the impact is going to be on all human beings. And if I borrow from the indigenous cultures around the world, and I want to know how it's going to impact us 7 generations into the future. And then there's one more after that, which virtually nobody on the planet really lives in, even though we can articulate it. It's I'm concerned about all that is. So I include the planet itself. And nowadays, because of people who want to go to Mars, maybe the universe. How much more space junk do we want floating around, because we've put satellites up there that have, stopped working, and they either fall to Earth or they just float around up there. So coming back, so bringing those 4 stages about me and my group, so us, about all of us, or about all that is, if you listen to the language of the mayoral candidate, the Democratic candidate in New York City, Mamdami, he's talking about taking care of all New Yorkers and treating them according to their ability to pay more or less taxes, and helping those who need more help from the government, and demanding that those who don't need as much help pay their fair share. Take him, put him over here for a second. Now take just the general language of Donald Trump and MAGA on a larger scale. America first. So it's not about what's going on around the world. We're the best country. America first, by the way, was a slogan taken from the American Nazi Party in the 1920s, 1930s. That's when it was first used, America first. To the extent that, as Donald Trump withdraws the United States from various international agencies and organizations, what he's doing is empowering. China loves it. China just sits back and says, all right, we'll do that. The U.S. isn't going to give money to people that need it anymore and help feed starving children in Africa. We'll do it. And that builds influence. And who, for those countries, want to ally themselves with that? Whoa, China's better than the United States. The United States bailed on us. So America first, as Trump practices it, is this narrow view of the world. And take one more step and I'll shut up. When Trump does it, he doesn't even really care about America first. He cares about the slogan. He cares about Donald's first. There's virtually nothing that he does on a daily basis that's not about his own self-aggrandizement. He doesn't have a long-term strategy for what he does. He's using Project 2025, which he has a contractual agreement with the Christian right. They wrote that over the last 40 years, and in exchange for his agreement to execute it, should he win the election, they helped fund his election twice, or 3 times. He lost one. But if you listen to him day to day and watch him in meetings with world leaders, there is no strategy there. He wants to win every conversation he's in. He wants to be shown that he's the smartest guy and he can bully other people. He does that with everyone. And if somebody can show, the closest thing he came to not doing that was when he was sitting with Greg Abbott when he went and visited, the flood victims and the floods down in Central Texas last week. And he basically had this little vague hint of compassion and empathy, but he couldn't express it. Could not express it without comparing it to other things. This was worse than the hurricanes. This was worse than the fires. So he had to, he had to like smack the California people, smack the people from Louisiana and even Florida who have been hurt by hurricanes, and North Carolina who were hurt by flooding from the hurricane. In that moment, he wanted to say, this is the most important thing and I'm doing a good job. But he couldn't do it without minimizing other people who are upset. And that's what he always does. And there are people who think he's doing a good job and think he's good for the country. But that's because he thinks they're taking care of them and their groups. We'll never touch Medicaid. Why? And Medicaid has been touched, and it's going to be touched for the next 10 years. So Mamdani is speaking to those people who have been left behind by the status quo, Democratic and Republican status quo in American politics, and specifically in Mamdani's case in New York City. And Trump is the status quo on steroids. His changes to the conventional status quo actually make it work for most people and make it better for a handful of billionaires and probably some millionaires. So it's as you said, it's a real choice. Who do we want to choose? Who's going to really help all Americans? And how do we get all Americans to look at it that way? Not just what's best for me personally, but what's best for all the people in this country, especially those who are worse off than I am. And that's the move, that's the educational move we want to keep moving. How do we take care of all of us, especially those who are less well off than I am, whoever I happen to be? That's kind of a larger perspective, but that's where I operate from and have for some decades now. I'll never be rich. or famous. But I
Well,
care about people. And millions of other Americans do too, Republican and Democrat. So let's just be clear on that. But some have been misguided in thinking that the government they know is the government they want to keep. And that's not necessarily true.
well, see, I think that you said earlier when in your first take, you talked about how most Americans don't understand. Basically, you didn't say this in this term, but I believe you were referring to it. They don't understand civics. They don't understand, or you said they were afraid of socialism, the word socialism, even though we have all these social programs within the United States and folks benefit from it every day. Most of the folks who are against, as you say, are scared about socialism, I guarantee don't really understand what it means.
Right.
And we can no longer continue to live in a world where that's the broader or the majority of our constituents. It's people who think that way. I mean, I am a proponent of we got to re-examine, whether voting should be a right or a privilege. And I know the only reason I feel it should be a right is because it was a privilege. Of course, I know it would be discriminatory and it'd be held, certain people would not be able to vote. That'd be the only reason. But I think that there definitely should be some form of literacy test that every American should have to go through in order to be able to vote. You got to at least be able to choose 5 things about this candidate you like or that you're voting for. Something to show that you're not just being a sheep led into just pull a lever or check a box because you've been told to do it and then you don't understand why you did it. I'm hearing so many people now on YouTube who are celebrities, or not celebrities, but influencers in form of fashion, talking about they regret their Trump vote now, as though they didn't know Trump would do that. One thing about Trump, he's shown his behavior show exactly who he is. He shouldn't be surprising anybody. It's like you say, he's a liar. He constantly lies. Mm-hmm. It's like the media used to break down how many lies he would say in a conversation. These are 570 lies this year. So they don't even do that anymore because Trump's gotten to the point where he scared the corporate leaders of these corporations, so they don't want to either get the irony of the government to come after them, so they cow to him, they bend the knee, so to speak. And we're seeing so much of that. What he's doing right now in Washington, D.C., when he's demanding that the commanders change their name back to the Redskins. Just, again, we all know that's just a tactic to get people to stop talking about Epstein and have some furor and that can dominate the media. But if he wins that fight, the owners cut out and bend the knee and do that, even though they said they wouldn't do it. And folks can't even see the fact that since they changed their name, they've been winning. So they should see that and leave that recipe alone. They're now a formidable team. So why would you want to go back to something that that has this disdain of negative energy around it? But again, Trump's doing that because he's showing he can. There's this rap song that I grew up when I was listening, and it always stayed on my mind. It was Natural Born Killers, and it was a song with Dr. Dre and Ice Cube. And this is after they got back together, after they break up in Death Row. And there's a skit in the song where this couple's walking down the street, and this guy comes up and he robs them. Mm-hmm. And then the guy's like, "Why you robbing me, brother? Why would you rob us?" And the robber says, "F you, because I can." That's how Trump moves through his presidency, and Republicans move through their presidency is F you because we can. It's like when you try to ask, how can you be so cruel? How can you just, kick down doors of human beings and kick them out without really knowing if they truly are illegal or a citizen or not? You just, the fact they're brown skinned, you're going to just do that because I can. That you're going to sit here and say, well, we're not going to teach Black history in certain schools or in public schools in certain states like Florida because I can, So, and his constituents, the mega ones, love that. Either they don't benefit from it. Then nothing of that benefits them at all, right? And then finally, I had the conversation with a friend of mine, again, who happens to be Black, grew up with him all my life, and he was trying to articulate talking points from other folks about, well, if the immigrants were kicked out, then folks would have to force to pay a higher salary because see, they're not gonna pay me a high salary because an immigrant can come in and do the same job for less. So they're gonna pay me. So again, believing that your problem, your solution to your problem is external to you, believing that some politician is going to change that for you and your life's going to be better because whether it's Democrat or Republican with regards to economics, it's going to improve your life financially. Instead of saying it's in my control, that if I want to not let an immigrant, quote unquote, beat me out for my dollars or for the position, then I need to create more value in what I do, my skill sets, and what I bring to the table. I never forget late great Jim Rome. He says the biggest misconception that people have is that they get paid per hour. You get paid, here's my hourly rate. So that's the biggest misconception. You don't get paid per hour. You get paid for the value that you bring to the hour. And see, we never want to look at that and examine that in that context. We keep talking about raising women wage because it sounds nice. But if you're paying somebody who's making $13 an hour and you pay them $20 an hour, he still can afford to live in New York, still can't afford to live in DC. So it's like we do all this debating and arguing, and it's an exercise literally in futility because that's still not going to change that person's situation to get that. So yeah, it sounds nice, and most people who are making 13 would gladly accept 20, I'm sure. But when you really look at it, if you're making 20, you have to really sit down and say, okay, you were making 20, where would you live? Where would you shop? How would your life change significantly because of that $7 an hour pay increase? You know, so we got to get real about how we really put the messaging out. That's why I say, you know, again, it goes back. Noam Chomsky was saying this back in the 80s. It came out with a movie called Corporations, or where he spoke in the movie Corporations, but the book Manufacturing Consent, where at the end of the day, the media's job is not to inform us. It's to manipulate us. It's to control us. And it always has been. And that's why Donald Trump was able to be so successful when he came out and said fake news, because folks who were aware of that knew that the media was not putting out true news. And I'm speaking of majority of the media. Yeah, there are some good media organizations such as Democracy Now! I believe PBS, despite what Republicans think. I think PBS is a great news source. I get a lot of value out of PBS. I donate to PBS and will continue to donate to PBS. But with those exceptions, and I'm sure there's many others I'm not mentioning, but my point is the majority of the media, especially the big corporations, CBS, NBC, they're only owned by 3 or 4 companies anyway. And then we have this false sense of freedom in this country that people think they're fighting for. Like we really have freedom. We don't really have freedom. When you go to the supermarket, you see all this assortment of cereal. You think I have a lot of choices to choose from. But if you really, again, do your research, you realize that 95% of cereal that you see on that shelf are controlled by 3 or 4 companies. Same thing with soft drinks, I'm sorry. So it's like you're not really having freedom. You have freedom to choose within those same corporations, but you really don't have freedom as you think. You don't have freedom to let your boss know how you want your leave to be. He's going to tell you what your leave is when you get hired. So you don't have freedom there either. So these false things that we believe we operate within because we have the freedom to spend money where we want to spend money. That's a freedom that we have. But then the media manipulates us so that we spend money in the direction we're supposed to spend money in. You know, again, our consent has been manufactured. So I close on that point.
Yeah, I just want to say one quick thing because I know we're at the top of the hour about the voting thing. I think requiring testing for voting is a really delicate issue. I'm not 100% against it, but I would argue that it should be part of a, you know, getting back to what and a lot of Republicans say this is one thing that I do agree with, getting back to the teaching of civics and government as a required, you know, beginning in middle school into high school, that you have to take the class, that you have to learn about voting and civics and pass a test. But I would argue that voting, not only, the right privilege thing is that's a good debate to have. I would argue it should be a legal requirement that if you're going to live in this democracy, you are legally required to vote in the elections. And if you don't, you're not going to go to prison or anything like that. But there should be a penalty that's really inconvenient. Your driver's license gets suspended, or something that's impactful. Not everybody has a car, so that's not going to work. But I think it should be a legal requirement because, and here's the reason that'll never pass with Republicans. If everybody in this country votes, in terms of all the decisions that the Supreme Court has made, because Congress doesn't really make any laws anymore. I mean, they did the big beautiful bill, but that came from Trump. If everything from safer gun laws to women's right to choose to more equitable tax rates, all of that, the species is evolving, the worldviews are evolving, and like nobody who's in Congress now who's a MAGA Republican could win. If everybody voted, they would all lose. Donald Trump couldn't win. If everybody in this country, 18 years of age and older, were required to vote, and they did, the whole conversation would change. And the Republicans are very aware of that. Since 1980, they've been saying, we don't want everybody to vote. We do better when everybody doesn't vote. Paul Weyrich was the first person to say it. So I think it should be a legal requirement. You have to vote.
Well, even if everybody did vote, at least from a national standpoint, the Electoral College can still outweigh those votes and still determine they're going to vote who they want.
No, I agree with that. I agree with getting rid of the Electoral College as well. But the Electoral College, just say this, even though it's obvious, there's only one election that the Electoral College has any impact on. That's the presidency. I'm talking about a legal requirement to vote in every congressional, local, vote. Because most of us are impacted day to day by what happens at City Hall, not in the U.S. Congress. I mean, that's kind of an overstatement, but you have to vote on Election Day. And every municipality has to make it as easy as possible and as secure as possible for everybody to vote. And that, we put people on a freaking moon, right? We cure much more cancer than we used to. We have hip replacements and we replace hearts. We transfer lungs from one person to another. We can't make voting both easier and secure only because we don't really want to. Sorry.
Well, I think that should definitely be a show, because there's a lot I want to say on that. I have some thoughts around it, just, but I know that we can go on that particular topic. So I'll say that because we're at the end of our show.
Yeah.
But, we both think, bottom line is we both are advocating for change. And that's what I'm saying. At the end of the day, so whoever runs for office should have some form of radical change in order to at least get me excited, hopefully get you excited on their vote. It just can't be, I'm not them as your platform.
Right.
Now, with that being said, we reach the end of our show. Let's move on to the fact that now the next segment of our show is Reggie's going to walk us out of some. Now, let's say, where's your close, the solutions of where we stand on how we can move forward being fully human with the mega world we live in right now.
Yes, well, I'm going to bring it back to those developmental worldviews. When I'm going to speak first person, but when any one of us has an opinion or a viewpoint on a candidate or on a policy, on a platform plank, on a proposed law, whatever it is, I have an opinion. Two questions. One, to what extent am I aware of the impact that candidate, law, platform, plank, whatever it is, will have on those less fortunate than I am? Okay? How aware am I of the impact of that thing, whatever it is, person, platform, law, um, on those who are less fortunate than I am, whoever you are. Unless you're the least fortunate person in America, there's at least one person less fortunate than you are. And then two, to what extent do I care? And I could say three, if I don't care, who am I really then? So, to what extent am I aware of the impact of this candidate or that law on others who are less fortunate than I am, and to what extent do I care about it? And if you realize that you don't care at all about those less fortunate than you, then maybe it's time to, begin a meditation practice, go back to church, hit yourself in the head with a hammer. I don't know, but develop in such a, that was a joke. Please, nobody listening, hit yourself in the head with a hammer. But we need to care about each other, right? We need to care about each other. It is that simple in some ways.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I agree 100% that we need to see each other as more fully human. And if we did, then I think the world would be a totally different place. I know it would be, because I see it happening with folks who I meet on a daily basis on Zoom in my business. And we see each other as human beings, and we operate differently, respectfully. So as we close our show out by highlighting someone who we believe has shown these fully human characteristics, whether they're from the past or from the present, we want to give them their flowers. I'm going to choose today our actual topic for today, Zohran Mamdami. Now, maybe I might be pronouncing his name, so please forgive me. I'll learn it the more I say it, obviously, and learn more about him. But again, I choose individuals who I believe are fully human based according to 6 pillars that I created based off things that you've taught me, things that I've learned. I came up with 6 pillars to help me really understand what fully human means. So I want to kind of quickly go through those to state my reason for why I'm choosing him in this context. And again, from what I'm seeing currently, and that's what I want to make sure people understand. It's not about your whole life. It's about, are you living a fully human period of time and affecting and impacting others' lives positively? And for me, in the moment, he's doing that. So identity is number 1, the first pillar. He's deeply integrated, multi-layered self-view. He honors his heritage and advocates inclusivity, inclusive identity. Love it. He creates spaces for paradox, reflecting on the difference between his roles and other people. That's why identity, when you choose his identity to operate in that context. Number 2 is his growth mindset. He's obviously open to learning and understanding how to improve and be a better person. That's showing that through his platform. He has a higher purpose in serving, which is pillar 3. He has a clear servant leadership rooted in the struggle for housing justice, equality, and public good. His number 5 is his core principles, making sure he embodies values of justice, affordability, and grassroots democracy. He walks the talks under scrutiny. Number 5 now is grateful spirit. He expresses gratitude for community support and shared struggle. And number 6 is he's self-aware. High capacity for reflection, recognize how actions and his actions ripple through communities, and he's open about growth and his mistakes he's made. So to me, he's exhibiting what a political figure running for office exhibiting fully human looks like. I mean, I agree with everything he's doing, but when he advocates for the greater good of all, I can support that.
Yeah, amen to that. So I'm going to pick somebody from the past. I mean, the last couple of months, I'm building out this year-long Healing America's Narratives class, and I'm also building out a poetry of witness class, meaning that the history of poets and people who maybe even weren't poets at the time, writing about their lives amid horrible times, world wars. It goes back a millennia and a half, at least, the tradition of poetry of witness. And one of the poets I've been reading, I've read before, but I've been reading more of in recent months, is the late Russian poet, Anna Akhmatova is her name. And she had a really difficult life, was married several times, Her first husband, after their divorce, was actually executed by the Stalinist forces. Her firstborn son spent time in one of the gulags. I think he spent time twice in one of the gulags. He ended up becoming something of a radical, kind of to the right radical himself as an adult. But she had just chronicled basically from the 1920s forward what happened during the Stalinist times, during World War I, World War II. And it's just heartbreaking to read. Obviously it's read in translation. She was, by her own admission, not a perfect human being, but somebody who was able to pay attention in horrific times, going through horrific moments in her own personal life, and still able to write and live and get up every morning. So I just want to, and there's any number of other poets historically who have done similar things in this country and in other countries. But Anna Akhmatova is my choice for today.
All right. Definitely look her up, and definitely appreciate you sharing that. So as we wrap up our show, I want to let everyone know who's listening, whether you're listening live, you're listening as a recording, that you get some from the show, and that we all can continue to strive to be fully human. And so until next Wednesday at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, let's all strive to be more fully human. Thank you.